Hello Pokefans and Fakemon fanatics, my name is Matt and I've been developing a Fakemon region for the past 2 years now, but I feel like it's finally time to commission artists and showcase what my ideas are. So what would my ideal Pokemon games be? The names of the games would be Pokemon Agate and Pokemon Obsidian, and they would take place in the Cronia region. Yeah, I know the Cronia region is just a logo right now, and so are the game titles, but map commissions are expensive. I do intend for there to be one, but we'll have to wait. The Cronia region is primarily based on Scotland, which is where I live, but I know what you may be thinking. Isn't the Crown Tundra based on Scotland? Yes and no. I won't deny that the geography of the Crown Tundra is based on Scotland, since the Galar region is pretty much England flipped upside down, so to the south of that would be Scotland. And yes, Scotland is a bit colder, it's not really a tundra area, and the whole of Galar is pretty much a homogenized version of what UK culture is like, and the inspirations come from all across the UK, but mainly England. Nothing about the Crown Tundra specifically, other than the main mascot legendaries, are inherently Scottish, and the most Scottish Galar gets beyond that are like Viking inspirations with Berserker. I guess Galarian Rapidash is a unicorn. Cronio is meant to be Scotland through and through. To address the discrepancy between Cronio and the Crown Tundra in lore, I'm actually proposing that the Crown Tundra, the inhabitants of it, moved to the Cronia region and settled there, hence why it's called Cronio. Neo means new, the Crow bit is short for crown, so it's essentially the new Crown Tundra. Kind of like Nova Scotia in Canada is kind of called New Scotland for similar reasons. And in fact, to fill in some of the gaps that Sword and Shield left because they had some Scottish things, I decided to include some Canadian things because of Scotland's ties to Canada, and also the lore kind of makes sense as a result. So that's a crash course into what the Cronia region is and what it's based on. So this video is actually about the starter Pokemon that you get at the start of Pokemon Agate and Obsidian. I've kept you waiting long enough. You get greeted by Professor Barkley and you see 3 Pokeballs. Let's see what's inside them. Meet Buttercup, Flamoo, and Platycroot. If you're wondering how they tie into the personality triangle, Buttercup is cute, Platycroot is funny, and Flamoo gets cool later. Let's cover Buttercup first. I commissioned Ryoma art on Instagram for this line. The name comes from Buttercup and Cub, which is the name of a baby lion. Yes, to fit within the extinct megafauna theme of the grass starters, Buttercup is a lion. The lion species that inspire this line are the American lion and the Barbary lion. The latter will become more apparent in the final stage. Also, if you're wondering why a lion has spots, it's because some lions have spots, including the American lion, which was the original inspiration. As for the abundance of yellow in its design, let me draw your attention to its chin. Buttercup is based on the playground myth that if you put a buttercup next to your chin, and your chin looks yellow, it means you like eating butter. So I basically translated that into the design by having Buttercup enjoying yellow plants. Hence why its chin, whisker marks, and front paws are yellow. Other parts are yellow because of the colour scheme in it. Also, if you're wondering what a lion is doing in Scotland, the Royal Banner of Scotland depicts a lion, which was adopted in the 13th century, so isn't really anything to do with England despite the lion being their national animal. Side note, I find it surprising that there isn't really any new lion Pokemon in Galar. Also, the lion is red and Buttercup's lion is green. Heck, its shiny isn't red either. More on that when I get to its final evolution. Moving on to Flamoo. I commissioned Fungi Fakemon on Instagram for this art. The name comes from flame and moo, the onomatopoeia for the noise a cow makes, and it also sounds like a chew, the onomatopoeia for the sound of a sneeze. So I did use the Chinese zodiac for this. There is much debate in the community at the moment whether or not we even should use it as an inspiration, especially after Fuecoco. Regardless, I feel like the ox was a good loose inspiration. It's not an ox yet, hence why it's loose.
It's currently a cow calf that sneezes sparks and embers, and it's adorable! Its hooves are hammers that blacksmiths use, since this line is based on blacksmiths. Also, here's the shiny. Isn't it cute? The only other thing I have to add is it has a tag motif, which is just a general reference to cattle. The line is more complex than this, but I guess Flammu itself is fairly simple. So the last of this trio is Platycrute. I commissioned Kai Fakemons art on Instagram for this art. The name comes from platypus and recruit, but I hear what you may be thinking if you're grammatically correct. But Matt, platypuses have nothing to do with Scotland. And you'd be right. All I can say is it was an interesting route to take for a Pokemon. Also, literally every semi-aquatic animal Scotland has to offer has either already been done, or is really close to something that has been done. I know I'm shooting myself in the foot if I ever wanted to do an Australia-based region, but they have a lot of animals to work with anyways. The theming for water starters is also a military class and or weapon. I picked one from each. For this Cuties line, I went for a navy theme, hence the symbol on its chest denoting rank, its tail being a ribbon, and its hair referencing a beret. So why navy? Well, Scotland is currently part of the UK, and the UK has a Royal Navy. That's not just it, but the main reason. Another reason is tied to 007 himself, James Bond, who had the whole spy motif down in Sobble's line, but he's actually canonically a commander of the Royal Navy. Daniel Craig was made an honorary commander as a result. Also, James Bond canonically grew up in Scotland, which Ian Fleming wrote because he liked Sean Connery so much. Lastly, there's another naval connection with Scotland. John Paul Jones, a Scottish-born naval commander. He is known as the father of the American Navy due to his contributions to said navy in its infancy. So yeah, I feel like this design philosophy is justified in terms of theming. It's not as if every water starter is always lined up with each region's inspiration. Also, here is its shiny. Anyways, now that you've seen the Cuties, let's evolve them. Hopefully these middle stages aren't too awkward. Buttercup evolves into Azaleo. The name comes from azalea, a kind of flower, and Leo, which is Latin for lion. Admittedly, not much new is happening in this stage. Because it's bigger, its appetite is bigger, and because its unhealthy diet is the same, it has become unfit. It also has cute yellow spots on its cheeks. Also, flowers and what appears to be fur are blooming. It's still as playful as before, but wouldn't choose to play with Buttercup, which mirrors adolescence in humans. There's not really anything else to note other than the shiny is also pink. I might as well say here that the yellow in its design is in itself a reference, so I elected for the shiny to also include yellow too. Flammu evolves into Temoku. The name comes from Temercy, which is the Turco-Mongol word for blacksmith. Temperature, emo, as in the culture, and ku, which is the Scots word for cow. Also, yes, this does technically mean I'm naming this Pokemon after Genghis Khan, since his birth name was Temujin, which can be traced back to blacksmith. It was my brother's idea, as he is a blacksmith himself. Also, check out Ember Ironwork, my brother's blacksmith business. Not sponsored, but I decided to be supportive. In our defense, this wouldn't be the first Pokemon to be named after Genghis Khan. It is now based on the Highland Cow. Finally, something Scottish! And what's this? Eyeliner, which happens to be made of soot? Piercings? Yes, because this Pokemon is emo! I guess you could say this was spurred on by being a moody teen, but I do know that not all emos are simply moody teenagers. It is a lifestyle just as respectable as any other. The reason I wanted to do this is because I needed this Pokemon to have some personality, and the long hair on a Highland Cow reminds me of when emos, and or teenagers, and or me I guess, I used to have long fringes, so I feel it's a natural fit. Also, it has a tattoo of a Pokeball. I mean, it kinda is. It will develop into proper tattoos in its final form, but I wanted it to be vague if it was a tattoo, or when farmers brand their animals with a hot iron, which does fit with the whole blacksmith concept. If it is the latter, it's also a pun. It's both kinds of branding. Not just the definition I gave, but the promotion of a particular product or company by means of advertising and distinctive design. Hence, the Pokeball design. Anything else is just a natural development of Flammu, the shiny included. I really like this, and I think it's my favourite middle stage of the three conceptually. And Platycrute evolves into Platenant, and the name comes from platypus and lieutenant. And its name sounds a bit like David Tennant, a famous Scottish actor. It's gone up in the world, since it's a lieutenant commander now. It has body parts which resemble uniforms, or maybe naval uniforms were based on it. It's got a better ribbon and a fancier rank acting almost as a collar or lapel. Its tail now has 2 ribbon colours that are similar to the Canada General Service Medal. It's even saluting! Like with Zaleo, I don't have much to say. I wanted the stage to be the perfect in-between between the first and final stages, but I wanted it to both be distinct as well as a bit goofy. The shiny is also purple. Yeah, I think I blew my load too early here with its design concept. Now, everything I've talked about thus far has been shown on the Chronio region's Instagram, at Chronio_region. But these final evolutions shall debut in this video. So, when you reach level 25 for these guys, you'll evolve your starter into Leonage! And the name comes from Leo, again, L. leonurus, which is the species name for the lion's tail plant, Sage, which can either mean the herb or what a wise person is called, and Age, because Leonage would tend to be the oldest of the line. It is now part Fairy type. To me, Fairy types do strike me as a Wisdom type, not the Wisdom type, which is Psychic, but I think Fairy still fits. I also think it fits with the playful nature of the line, and I also like how it's not an overly feminine Fairy type, which is a trope I see all too much in Pokemon. And I'm glad there are some deviations that are starting to emerge in Fairy type designs. I'm not saying I don't like femme fairies, heck, I'm introducing some myself, but this is still nice. If you guessed from this line's shinies being pink that it would become a fairy type, congratulations! In fact, this is a theme shared amongst this trio. Another theme shared amongst this trio is their final forms having a part of their body that shares a name with something that it's based on. In this case there's 2. The tail, as you might have guessed from the naming scheme, is based on the lion's tail plant. Because of that core element, I didn't want that to change the shiny, as with the yellow on the mane, which in itself is based on a fungus known as lion's mane, hence the pale yellow colour. Is this further evidence as to why it could be poison instead of fairy? Yes, but I think it has just as much right being fairy, and another starter is poison type. Also, grass poison has been done before, and grass fairy has not. The mane is also very much inspired by the Barbary line's massive mane. Also, speaking of its mane, the shape resembles dreadlocks. This isn't referencing anything, more a tool to make an even grander reference. These dread-like mane segments have orange tips, the same orange as the tail for colour scheme purposes, but this makes the mane look similar to Native American headpieces, which essentially makes the mane not only a literal reference to Barbary lines, but a thematic reference to the American line. To justify the Sage and Age part of the name origin, it's not just the fact that the war bonnet is worn by leaders of tribes, and to be a leader you should not exactly be too young but also wise, but the personality of this Pokemon is very much based on wisdom too. It's still playful like the others in the line, even to the point where it's happy to indulge young if they want to play with it, not just Buttercup, but other Pokemon and humans alike. Although, it's wise enough to know when playtime goes too far. Fernox. The name comes from furnace and ox. Yeah, underwhelming in comparison to Temaku. It is now an ox. As you can see, it's quadrupedal. This is because I, like many fans, are tired of the final evolution of every fire-type starter being bipedal. Originally it was going to be able to switch between quadrupedal and bipedal, but now I feel like it should mostly be quadrupedal. Its front legs are like heated metal, which can warp to become hands to hold its tools. So I guess it still can become bipedal. It has more piercings and its tattoos are now more fiery on its hind legs. Perhaps not necessarily emo anymore. I'm not saying it's just a phase, by the way, I'm just saying plenty of adults who aren't necessarily emo have piercing and tattoos too. I have multiple of the latter, for example. Its adult nature also shows, as it almost has a beard made out of molten metal. The soot is no longer makeup, however. It appears on the face everywhere but the eyes due to goggles blacksmiths wear. It also has an apron made of soot, since blacksmiths wear aprons. It also has horns that resemble the horns of an anvil, a tool blacksmiths use with their hammers which act as their feet. I must stress that in the UK, the horn of an anvil is called a bick. One last tool I'm going to reference, which you can't see in this art but the concept art shows it. Fernox's tail is tongues! Something else which you won't be able to see in the final art is that its butt is an exhaust pipe, which I thought is funny. This is because Ferronox isn't just an ox, but a furnace too. Big surprise. It has more exhaust fumes on its shell. It only has a shell to make it look less naked, show that it's a furnace, and showcase its new steel type. Yup, the shiny is silvery grey because of its eventual steel type. I think fire steel should be used on more than just Heatran, and I thought blacksmithing was a very natural theme to fit this type combo, so I made the starter a blacksmithing cow/ox thing. Yeah, I'm very proud of this line, and my brother likes them too. Pladmiral! The name comes from Platypus and Admiral. We now have the Admiral of the fleet. It now looks as if it's wearing an Admiral uniform, even down to the fact that its hair resembles the cap of a Navy Admiral. The bill is the bill of the cap. And yes, the hair plus muscular physique make Pladmiral look like Guile from Street Fighter, although the hair in this style also makes it look a bit like Lieutenant Surge. So what? They were both military people too. The tail is the ribbon on the Navy Gold Medal, since that is only awarded to admirals, and its pose is similar to the "We Need You" recruitment posters you tend to see with military organisations. So why is it holding an egg? Well, this egg is also a grenade. Yes, a grenade. That's the weapon theme. This is because platypuses are one of the very few mammals that lay eggs. They are also venomous, hence the poison typing. And yes, this is why the shinies were purple. Unlike the animal it is based on, Pladmiral doesn't use a spur on the hind of its foot to poison foes. It uses its egg grenades, or just any poison attack, but I want to make the egg grenades a big thing. And I hope you notice the egg grenade it's holding in its art has a similar colour scheme to the Pestiballs from Pokemon Snap, as they'd act visually similarly anyways. The poison typing also thematically ties in with the military because it's toxic! I know it's dumb, but I still think Pladmiral really works. So that's that then. If you're wondering about the overall theme, as I've said, it's that each of their designs feature a body part that shares the name of something tied with their design, with Leonage's tail and mane being based on the lion's tail plant and the lion's mane fungus respectively, Ferronox's horns being based on the bix of an anvil, and the bill on Pladmiral being based on the bill of a navy cap. Their shinies have the theme of representing the secondary type of the final form, but if you want a better, less niche theme, then I guess they're all somewhat to do with organizations. You've got Buttercup line being based on school, the whole playground myth and playfulness of a child kind of idea. You've got the Flamoo line being based on blacksmiths, i.e. hard labor. And then you've got the Platycroot line, which is military, with the navy. So, you've picked your starter? Great! That'll be 5,000 Poké-Dollars, please. What's that? It's out of your price range? You didn't expect to have to pay? What did you think this is? Professor Barkley's free Pokemon giveaway? You can't expect to get things for free, you know. So either pay the price or get out of Professor Barkley's sight! Hi, thanks for watching. This was originally not meant to end here, but since the video is getting a bit long, it is. So next time, can't exactly start without a starter. If you can't pay this, your mother will pay 5,000 Poké-Dollars to you if you pick the premium starter. If you flat out refuse, there are 3 more options, but I'll save them for next time. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and ring the notification bell. Check out the Cronia Region's Instagram as well for more details about these starters. I'll see you next time for covering the rest of the starters. The other trio, the bootleg starters. Thanks for watching!